Welcome to another installment of Help Prep With Me. This would be installment number 2, done ad-lib from my car as I drive home from work, thinking about the review of the Tyranny of Dragons, Horde of the Dragon Queen, Session 5 that happened, and Session 4 that happened before that. So the last video I did, I was talking about prepping leading up to the Dragon Hatchery, which is just outside of the cultist camp, nested into a cave in the cliffside. And I had gone through what each of those rooms were. I'm happy to report that in my session, the players went through every one of those rooms, got into a couple skirmishes with kobolds. They missed the troglodytes entirely, and then got into an interesting charisma-based encounter with Langtadrosa Cyanrath and the 2 humans that were in that chamber with him. This is the chamber number 9 that was dedicated to the Shrine to Tiamat. The interesting thing was that because of my error in not having Langtadrosa Cyanrath fight them at the end of Chapter 1, Greenest in Flames, I had he did not know them, and they did not know him. So he was a completely new NPC for the party and the campaign completely. They had no idea who he was. And why would they? They hadn't run into him anywhere. They had heard his name mentioned by a cultist dragon wing that'd be rank 2 in the Cult of the Dragon. And they heard his name from that cultist, which that cultist is going to get fleshed out more. And they didn't really know what to do with it, because they'd also heard the name Rezmir, and Rezmir is a much higher level NPC in this cult. She is the black dragon mask wearing cultist who is underneath the wearer of purple, which that name escapes my memory at the moment. But back to Cyanrath. Cyanrath ended up being in the chamber. I had him worshipping Tiamat briefly, finishing up, and then having a serious conversation with those 2 humans. Now, I realized in the heat of the moment that I had prepped nothing for those 2 humans that were there, so I did not know what to do with them. So I had this be a moment of exposition as the characters were stealthing in the hallway just outside that chamber, listening for any information. They ended up going in disguised as Dragon Claws, rank 1. And Cyanrath well, Cyanrath rebuked them for their disrespect to the Dragon Queen and required them to pray. And when their prayers were unsatisfactory to him, he told them to pray again. And then I started a conversation with one of the humans at Cyanrath, and I ended up opting for the human had failed in his duties to keep the prisoners from escaping. The prisoners that my players had let loose. And so the funny thing was, one of my players ended up taking the initiative to grab his longbow and at disadvantage attack and kill that human for his mistakes. And because the book doesn't give much information about who these humans are, I decided that they were of higher rank than the dragon wings and dragon claws. But at the moment, my players were disguised as dragon claws. So this guy attacks and kills the human in front of Cyanrath, and Cyanrath turns around, and it could have gone one of two ways in my head. Either attack and kill my party members, or have him be impressed at their audacity and their boldness, which is what I opted to do. So I then promoted my character from from Dragon Claw to Dragon Wing, rank 1 to rank 2. And I think this worked really well for the players, because otherwise the book says if they don't know Cyan Wrath, he says, hey, I don't recognize you, and then immediately attacks them. I just didn't find that very convincing. So maybe you may find that useful if you run this campaign yourself. After that, they ended up waiting for Cyan Wrath to leave his chambers, and all the other men in there as well. And then they went to Chamber 10, they discovered the eggs. They ended up slaying the 2 guard drakes and stealing the eggs. 2 black and 1 blue. Book says 3 black. I changed 1 to blue so that it would be a reason for that adult blue dragon to have been involved in the attack on Greenest. Sort of a blackmail tactic. I don't think that's really the right way to put it. Essentially a way to force that blue dragon into assisting the cult in intimidating the entire town. So that's why I chose to make that one blue. Well, while the players were in the cave system, I had the whole cult pack up and leave. And so they came out of the cave with their newly found dragon eggs, and the cult is just gone. Now, in their eyes, the eggs were completely safe there because Cyan Wrath and some stationed, posted guards were there to make sure that the eggs hatched, right? They were so close to hatching that Rezmir decided it was not worth moving them. Well, my players picked them up and moved them out of their incubation area, which is cold and damp, and moved them outside, which is warm and drier. And so this, in the back of my mind, and the characters didn't know this, the incubation was temporarily paused up until the conditions were met again, and the incubation would continue. Not saying that's realistic, but that's how I went with this. And so my party struck out to follow the cult, right? They had some information from Laos and Erlenthar, the monk who belongs to the Harper faction. And this information was slightly wrong. Because the reality was, I as a DM forgot the name of the place that the cult was going to go sack next, which is Baragost. And I thought it was Burdusk. And so I had Laosin give them Burdusk. And the characters ended up finding out that really the cult was going to Baragost. Similar name, very far away from each other. Like, I think it was 150 miles or something like that. And so now I would say they recognized that the information was incorrect because he was a prisoner and his information was as best as he could get for the situation he was in. So they struck out to follow the cult. And I got to roll a couple Wilderland adventures as I had the cult essentially blaze their own trail along just the grasslands just south of the Wood of Sharp Teeth over to Baragost from sort of what I call like the greater Greenest area. And I ran a couple things, none of which are really pertinent to campaign prep going forward. The interesting thing is that they ended up setting up camp at night when things were cooler and it started to rain. And while the split party members were off sort of infiltrating the cult for information and successfully doing so and establishing a relationship with a dragon wing that I have named Kinnear, and I will have to develop further. One of the black eggs started to crack around the party cleric, and I had the egg fully hatch, but the dragon wormling has not left it yet. And well, I left that as the cliffhanger. I let the other two come back to their little encampment to see that the egg was hatched. And so now I have that to prep, and I've been working on that in Kinnear. So what I have to discuss, I guess, pertains more to my campaign than the official campaign, because I am now in the section that is called On the Road, which is, I believe, Chapter 4. Because, yeah, Chapter 2 is the Raider Camp, Chapter 3 is Dragon Hatchery, Chapter 4 is On the Road. And this is just like one of the most disputed chapters in Horde of the Dragon Queen. I mean, a lot of people just really don't like it. So I'm kind of flavoring it with my own ideas. And one of those is just following the cultists to Baragost, trying to pass them. They do have horses from Laosin. And then they want to pass them by so that they can get to Baragost in time to warn them of the attack, right? So that Baragost can be saved. And so so I'm very likely going to have Baragost be this site of a battle, as the town will be prepping to ambush the cult. And the characters hopefully will get that information to the people of Baragost before the cult gets there. So I'm kind of working on these details as I'm talking out loud here. I'm thinking that Kinnear, the dragon wing cultist that I've kind of crafted into a bit of a leader, and also somebody with strong moral character who is still working for the cult, I'm thinking that he is going to be a somewhat pivotal character in this story going forward. It's interesting watching this party do things that I'm not used to, because my other party is less so roleplay heavy, more so analytical and driven to sort of attack and solve puzzles and such. That they aren't so much into the role playing, like dialogue with characters. This party seems to be a lot more into that, and so it's something I'm learning, and I'm enjoying it. But they are bringing in all sorts of stuff that I wouldn't have expected. Like, I'm preparing for them to get to Baldur's Gate to meet Ontharr Froom, the Order of the Gauntlet agent that knows Leos and Erlenthar, who is a harper, and the two of them are going to have a discussion. And this is after Leosin goes up to Waterdeep, which is considerably further, and warns the Council of Waterdeep, and then comes back. And so I haven't fully worked out all the later campaign details, but essentially I have my skeleton for the campaign right here, where I don't see it as completely necessary to follow all of the details that are put out in the book. I've done this with Tomb of Annihilation in the past. Sometimes it's best to just abbreviate the story and focus on what the players enjoy. And so that would be Kinnear, and then also this Black Dragon Wormling is an interesting thing thrown into the mix. I'm going to have my hands full figuring out how to do this. So Kinnear is going to be a source of probably not frustration for them, but he's a character of interest. They're trying to squeeze information out of him subtly, and he doesn't have tons and tons of information, so that's going to be a challenge for them. Another issue is that wormling, because, man, they are chaotic evil, and they are amazingly intelligent. I mean, they are intelligent enough that what I think my players are going to try to do will ultimately fail, but I don't want to do it immediately. I want to get them wrapped up in it. I want them to be really, really invested in the wormling. Wormlings, being dragons, have a high intelligence, high enough that they beat out the intelligence of most humanoids. My players are looking at this wormling and thinking, potential pet? And from the research I've done, it should be the other way around. The dragon should be looking at the humans and saying, servants. They are my servants. They serve me. I am their god. Or at very least their king, or something of that sort. And so what I'm thinking I'll do is I will, for the very, very short, shorten the lifespan of a dragon, which is like 1,000 years, but long for the players. I think for the first few months of their travel, if they keep this dragon with them, that he will get them into situations that make them concerned, right? Like they think that they are training him up to be this really well-behaved dragon, and then he breath attacks and kills an innocent person. Or he destroys a house with this acid attack, like it just melts through the building. Or something like that. Or he just eats the town dog. And that would cause distress. And it would cause confusion, and it will sort of hurt the reputation of the party if they don't get it under control. So now they've got this debacle. Well, we got this little wormling. What do we do with it? Like, we've been trying to turn it into our pet, and it's not working. Like, we've had some success, but this is, clearly a huge setback. What do we do? And ultimately the solution is dispose of it. And I don't want to plan for the disposal. I want them to come up with that themselves, and then I will watch and facilitate that. So I'll let them come up with the details on how they dispose of it. I'm not going to give them any ideas. Because if it gets from wormling to young dragon, which it shouldn't, except, I mean, it shouldn't for like 5 years, it shouldn't become a young dragon. If it becomes a young dragon, it becomes a serious nuisance. So anyway, that's an interesting dynamic in my party. Going forward, they're going to have that long on-the-road chapter, which just does not work well for most parties. So I think I'm going to do it hex crawl style, where I'm going to have random encounters, most of them pre-made. They're all forest or grassland based, and they aren't all battles. Some of them are points of interest, interesting people to meet, that sort of thing. Very much like your old school hex crawl, which I learned through Tomb of Annihilation. It's a great thing. I definitely want to keep that up for any travel in any D&D campaign I do. I highly recommend it to you. There's lots of resources on how to do a hex crawl well, and it was received very well by my party, and I think it will be really well received by this one too. So that's the goal, and I will make another iteration of this prep with me once I get there. I think my next session is going to be composed of hex crawl and then Baraghost, and set up the ambush, warn the people, and fight the cult, dealing with this black dragon wormling, and then maybe if they infiltrate the camp again, maybe a little more character development of Kinnear. That's what I'm thinking. Thanks for prepping with me, and have a wonderful week.